Hello and welcome to the Mysticast, where you join Jack Stafford and Deborah Littleboy, members of the Aetherius Society, the cosmic religion for the Aquarian Age, as we break down the barriers between religion, science, metaphysics, philosophy, and mysticism, all of which are really only aspects of the self-same quest for truth. Please note, this is an independent program, not produced or fact-checked by the Aetherius Society. Today, our guest is Lisa Campion. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for being here. I'm delighted to be with you both and so excited to talk about all that we're going to talk about today.
Super excited. We're going to talk about the secret to developing spiritual powers, practice, 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 and practice. Yep. This really resonates with us. Our president wrote this book, Unlock Your Psychic Powers,
right.
Richard Lawrence, and it explains many mystic yoga. There are so many yoga practices. I'm sure we'll get into which particular ones you like. I'm really keen to hear, and maybe you could kick off, introduce yourself a little bit, tell us who Lisa is.
Sure. Thank you so much. So I'm a psychic. I've been a professional psychic since I was 19 years old. That was a really long time ago, back in the late 80s, that I started doing psychic work. And I started doing that because I was just one of those people that was born psychic. So I've seen things, experiencing things, seeing energy around people, seeing spirits. It's really my very first memories come out of that. And because I was born in the 60s, my parents were hippies, thank them. So I had some pretty cool experiences actually when I was, you'll get a kick out of this. When I was 10 years old, they took me to transcendental meditation because that's what you did when you were a hippie in 1974. And actually met Maharishi. He did like a Shaktipat, like darshan on me. And it was quite amazing because, he brought us back into this room and he was speaking through a translator and he was kind of like, blah, blah, blah. And then he really looked at me. He was like, oh, he was speaking through his translator. He's like, oh, I'm so sorry, honey. Like, I see that you have a gift and it's kind of suck for you because no one here knows. He said to me, because America's basically a spiritually bankrupt country, you're going to be out of luck, but you need to hang in there because you're going to help a lot of people when you get older. And I was 10. And I was like, it was sort of the first time like an adult talked to me about my gift. And I was like, who was that weird old guy, And then I went to college and I studied comparative religion. And I realized, oh my God, that was Maharishi who said that to me. And I've had a lot of really kind of really interesting experiences like that, sort of spiritual experiences that were sort of like these light points in kind of a, difficult time. It wasn't so easy to grow up psychic back then. I had to be really quiet about what I was doing. It didn't go so well for you if you said you talked to angels and saw Dead Uncle Fred, that, you were likely to end up in a psychiatric facility back then. So I had to kind of keep it on the down low and figure out what was going on. And I did, and I started working, and then it was the dawn of the new age and things got better for me. But I feel like today, I'm really dedicated to helping people that are going through spiritual awakenings, and pop open their psychic abilities. Maybe you take a lot of yoga. Maybe you do a lot of meditation. Maybe you study Reiki. To me, these are the three gateways into mysticism that used to be you couldn't find that stuff, and now it's around, and thankfully it's around so much more. So people are having these spiritual openings, psychic awakenings, and don't know what to do. Like, it can be really frightening, really unbalancing. And I feel like my job is to help people, help psychics, healers, and empaths fully step into their gifts, because I think the world needs all the healers it can get. And if I can help people go through an easier way than I did, that's a good day for me.
Yeah, all those years of suffering, now you know the way through the path through the forest.
That's right.
It's really interesting about probably Deborah's got a lot of questions. I'll just jump in before she dumps the torrent. Reiki, we do prayer through the hands. It's channeling the same spiritual energy, but we pray into prayer batteries. So we have these crystals, and then we release the energy in it when there's an national an emergency, and this prayer energy, these prayer hours go to helping crises. And
Beautiful.
So that's one of the ways we do it. It's the same thing, healing and prayer. So just wanted to
And I think
So,
those things are really like those gifts. And, in the Christian mystic tradition, they talk about the 5 charismas of Christ, healing, prophecy, um, command. There are these things. And I've always been interested in the process of mysticism. And I think we go through sort of this mystical pathway. And I'm not particularly a Christian. My parents were Unitarian, so I grew up in a very ecumenical kind of environment. And they were big meditators, so I did a lot of meditation. But I do feel like as we step onto this road of mysticism and we do deep spiritual practice, we open up these powers to heal, powers to see, to our psychic potential. And I was so curious. I feel like this is something that's very similar. Um, it beliefs that we have is that those powers aren't particularly worth pursuing on their own. They're part of like a larger spiritual unfoldment, not to be held onto, not to be grasped, onto, not the point of what we're doing. They're like a byproduct of spiritual growth. And I just, that's what my spiritual teachers have taught me. And I sort of, feels right to me.
mm,
Yeah, well, that's perfectly aligned with what we've been told by the masters, that to open up ourselves so that we can use this physical robot body as a receiver and a transmitter, a radiator. We have to open up and understand how to make it work properly, because it's almost like we haven't used it for so long. It's all got a bit rusty. And nobody really knows what it, and it aches a bit and don't work properly, and everybody moans about it. And then then we find out that even by thinking it, you're actually making it worse. If you're, so it's got this whole thing. We just don't know what we've got. We don't know who we are. And so, as you just said, that as we open up, we're going to experience things that we've never experienced before, and they're just all like, oh, how wonderful. And it's so easy to get sidetracked into a meadow, and all you're going to do is play with your new toy. And that's not what it's about at all. You've got to that stage. So then you reject your new toy. You use all that energy and all that learning and all that experience to push it up to the next level, open up even more. And that's quite difficult because they're great toys, aren't they? They're great baubles. They're great things to keep you not...
Especially if you've been born with them, if that's all you know, if you're self-taught.
Yeah. Sure. And I think for a lot of us, it's just, and definitely people like me, it's just a framework. For me, it's the frame that I experience the world through. And I think in my early days as a psychic, I was really like searching for information, trying to figure out how to control it, how to master it. There wasn't a lot of information back then. It was really hard to find any books, in the library. There's no internet when I was trying to figure out what's going on. And so I really had to learn how to master and control it, turn it on and off, and figure out what was actually happening, what I was experiencing. And then I went through a long phase in my younger life where I was really like happy with the toy, like, ooh, look what I can do. And now I see it more as sort of like it's a tool that I use to help people. It's in service. It's not for me. It's not something that I use. And I think that we have to be careful, because when we get real spiritual power, when we gain real spiritual power, which doing spiritual practice will give you, we get sort of tempted off the path, by things like power, sex, money, these sort of temptations that come through. And are there. It's like the devil in the crossroads, that's always, what are you going to do with the spiritual power you have? And how many fallen gurus are there that have fallen to those temptations? And I think that psychic ability kind of goes in that category of power, and what's the purpose of it? What's the point of it? For me, it's really about helping other people.
Yeah, karma yoga, which is the yoga which the Aetherius Society is all about, selfless service to other people. And the more that we can understand and open ourselves up, the more we can be used as channels to serve. Yeah. So I'm really interested in the sort of the daily practices that you would, one, use for yourself, but two, get other people started to sort of as as the baseline.
Mhm.
Would you mind just sort of running
Sure.
through those with us?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. A great question. Because of my levels of sensitivity and empathic nature, one of my primary must-have tools is a energy clearing protocol. So what do we do when we're sensitive? And the more spiritually attuned we get, sometimes the more sensitive we are. What do we do when we're out and about in public and you have to go into the market or you have to be on a train, plane, around your in-laws, like all those things? How do we? So I use a daily breathing meditation and breathing practice, pranayama and meditation, to release the energy that I've picked up from other people, to ground myself, to come fully into my body, to bring myself first into the present moment best I can, and then to release that and any energetic residue that I picked up from other people, and to kind of work on creating a solid boundary around me. I find a lot of sensitive have porous boundaries, and we need help maintaining boundaries. So my first thing is ground, clear, protect, right? And then it's like I've gone through my life many phases of spiritual practice and meditation. I started as a martial artist after my parents taught me how to meditate. I did this great thing too called Silva mind control. Now it's called the Silva method, but it was I was in high school. It was a very foundational, like, visualization practice, learning to choose that you can choose your thoughts and feelings and put your attention on more positive energy, and having, like, meditation, doing daily meditation. Then I did a lot of martial arts, Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga over the years too. And these days it's a bit of a combination of those things. I do at least 20 minutes of sitting meditation with a breathing practice. I practice a breathing technique that comes from Qigong called the microcosmic orbit. Sometimes I do a mantra-based practice because I grew up in...
Rewind me back.
Sure.
Would you tell me about the breathing practice? Because I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, it's a foundational part of Qigong and Tai Chi. And what you do is you sort of connect your roots down into the ground, and you breathe energy up from the earth. So you're making a connection to the earth, right to the root chakra, the tailbone. And when you get to the tailbone, you sort of take a deep inhale breath, and you pull the energy of your spine. It's a very strong Kundalini generating practice, where you pull the energy of your spine and you breathe like to the front of your forehead, or you breathe up into your pineal gland. And you take you hold the breath. Even you can hold the root lock, like where you're really bringing the energy very strongly, hold the root lock for a minute, and then you exhale down the front part of the body. There's these two energy circuits, the one that goes up the back and the one that goes down the front part of your body. And sometimes you combine that with a mantra based, like Soham or Satnam, or there are many mantras you can use in combination with that. And what this does is it recirculates the energy through your own body, along this energetic pathway that in Qigong is called the microcosmic orbit. And it just tends to increase vitality. It's a Kundalini promoting breathing pattern. And then when you do that enough, then you open up the upper connection and use that energy that you have, built inside your own system to connect to the higher forces.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for the technical. Most people don't want to hear the technical details on that one.
It's interesting because we have a set of 6 breathing practices out of the many thousands that are out there. But Dr. King looked into the Western mind and devised 6 breathing practices that are safe in the rays of Kundalini and opening up the nadis, etc., etc. And so it's interesting for me to hear how some of these other practices come into play. The beautiful thing about our 6 for me is that when you know them, you can go through them in 15 minutes, 20 minutes. You can spend as long as you want to, hey? But to actually get through the whole exercise, you can do it comfortably 15, 20 minutes, which is doable. And what I'm finding with myself and when I speak to other people, that to actually get those habits rooted is vital, but there's a whole load of resistance that like ego resistance that comes in to stop
Totally.
to stop that happening. I mean, it's like am I getting
Absolutely.
like, you're agreeing?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's the squirm. I call it the squirm. And it's just when you're like, you don't want to sit on the mat today. You don't want to do the thing today. And or when you do, it's like all that resistance to me. It's a squirmy feeling like, oh, I don't want to really look inside myself. I don't want to look at those feelings. I don't want to look at my anxiety or my thoughts or my, chaos, my internal shadow, like all the things that happen when we introspect, and I'd rather like numb out or zone out or do something more fun. I mean, meditation's fun. It's in a deeper spiritual way, but like that squirminess of the ego self, it just doesn't want to be pinned down and looked at. Like picking up the rock and looking at all the squiggly things that are, under the rock. That's what meditation's like for me. So, and I think it's just discipline that helps us sit through the squirm. For me, is discipline. It's the same discipline I learned as a martial artist, honestly. When I was young, in my really formative years, I just wanted to be a Jedi Knight. So I took martial arts when I was 16. I was like, it's the only way I could figure out how to do it. And the same thing when I'm writing, like I'm just releasing my 4th book in a couple of weeks, and writing is very challenging, and it requires.
What's this book about?
It's a journal. It's a prompted journal that's like a workbook that's meant to go with my 3rd book called Awakening Your Psychic Ability. And this is like a series of prompts and exercises to kind of put into practice the theories that I'm talking about in my 3rd book. It's all of the things that are worth doing, I think, in life require that discipline. Spiritual practice is a discipline, and I've spent time in groups with teachers. Like, I love it that you have a society, you have a foundation, that you have a system, that you have teachers. And, I feel like we need that. And a lot of people tell me, well, I can't meditate. I can't settle my mind. And you can't just expect to plop down and have a clear mind. We have to have a process. We have to have instruction. One of my funniest instructions was when I was so interested in martial arts that I moved to Japan after college, and I lived there for a couple of years. And one of those mystical intervention moments, I lived in a really small town. There was one person who, in the middle of nowhere on the southern island of Kyushu, there was one person in the whole prefecture who taught the style of martial arts that I did. He happened to live in my town. He happened to be the best student of the founder of my school. He happened to be a Zen Buddhist monk and a Qigong master. And we had to do Zazen, traditional, like if we wanted to train in the dojo that night, we had to do Zazen 5 to 6 in the morning every day. And it was hardcore, on your knees on the mat, and instruction in Japanese. And if you fall asleep, he carried like a little stick. And if it's 5 in the morning, I'm like on the back with the stick. It was
Could be a movie, no? There's a movie in this.
hardcore.
Yeah.
So I was like, I said I wanted to be a Jedi Knight. Like, here I am, like, I don't know. I couldn't understand what he said because he was speaking in past Japanese, but I just feel like somehow that was sort of like, okay, on the mat, on the mat, on the mat, on the mat, and we need that structure, that process. Otherwise we're lost.
It's very unusual because many psychics are, as in Dr. King said, are in rose gardens. To be born with a wonderful gift is you've got it, use it. But they don't think about developing it or moving the Kundalini up, going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you've really done the work.
It's really easy to get locked in the psychic world, and I always knew, even when I was little, it was a pass-through point, to a larger sort of the mystical experience. I still have it. I still am a psychic. I do readings for people. I teach psychic development. I write books about it, but it's not the goal. It's just the pass-through.
What is the goal then?
I think the goal of all mystics is to find their way back to God. If I can use the G word there, for divine union, to find, and it's a very personal experience for all of us. It's a unique, I think, personal experience. But I think as mystics, we feel some calling inside of us at the level of our soul to do what we have to do to rejoin divine source, and however that is.
people think you're a psychic that you must know everything. Actually, Richard Lawrence, who wrote that book, he was on a radio show one time, and he asked the guy where the toilet was, and he said, "You're a psychic."
I know. I've heard them all. I've heard it all. You know, like, tell me what color my shorts are. You know, I'm like, oh no,
yeah.
no, that's not.
But if you use your psychic powers,
lottery
for that,
tickets,
yeah.
you know, lottery numbers, and
So
where are my car keys?
You hadn't heard about the Aetherius Society before. What was your impression having read the?
It was fascinating. I spent quite a lot of time researching it, and it's very, very cool. And I really feel like you're all onto something very powerful, and have pulled together many threads that I also find, meaningful, purposeful, relevant. Yeah, seems really solid and interesting.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's great to hear.
Loved it. I thought it was great. It was very inspiring. In fact, I ordered a copy of that book, although I haven't received it yet.
The 9 Freedoms?
No, the one about the psychic development.
Oh, okay.
Richards.
Yeah. I ordered it.
Pleased.
It's on its way. Because
it's all about union with God, except because the big takeaway from me when I joined the society was that I thought, as a Buddhist before, that you would get enlightenment, and then wham bam through the doors with the big man. But it turns out you have to go through enlightenment, cosmic consciousness, ascension, interplanetary existence, Saturnian existence, solar existence, onwards, and then your consciousness merges with other people. You become a planet, then a sun. The galaxy's a living being. All of this, and still not back to the source.
Still not back.
No, it takes.
No, I know. It's so long, and so many more lifetimes to get here than I think people, to where we are. I think there's so many behind us that we that we don't, like, oh, I've had a few hundred lifetimes. I'm like, I think it's more. It's like way more to get here. I think
he gave it a number. It was like a million.
Yeah, million. I think it's like, it's like in the millions to get where we are right now in this moment. And I've just been recently reading the books of Joshua David Stone, about him. He was an American psychologist, and I think he was a theosophist.
Mm-hmm.
And he gives sort of he has a book called the Ascension Manual that is very, very, very interesting. You might want to take a look at it, because it felt like the structuring of the process of ascension and enlightenment.
Is he still on this realm? Is he still?
No, he passed in the late 80s or early 90s.
We're not getting guests from the other realms yet, and we're not up to your ability.
I know. I'm sure they're around. We just can't. We can't quite dial them in the way we want. But check out that book, that Ascension Manual. I feel like would be like really aligned.
Well, it fits perfectly in line with Theosophy, and Madame Blavatsky has actually communicated with Richard Lawrence.
Really? Okay.
To endorse his new show.
Oh, interesting. I wondered if there was that thread in your work. I wondered. Yeah.
Well, it's Madame Blavatsky. They're the spiritual hierarchy of Earth. The Great White Brotherhood envisaged the Theosophical Society,
right?
The Ascended Masters, the people who've gone through Ascension, and the Cosmic Masters envisaged. Well, it was actually Saint GooLing who's head of the spiritual hierarchy of Earth, but the Cosmic Masters envisaged the Aetherius Society. So it's a new, it's the next generation.
So interesting. Yeah. It's really fun. And I've just spent all summer reading like 5 of his books, and then I was looking at your website and reading a lot of things and watching YouTube videos. I'm like, okay, like I'm seeing the circle.
And where my personal connection, strongest connection with listening to you, is that we have a Facebook group. Now, Facebook, we know, is like a big, dirty city, clamoring, horrible, gunky. But we need to be there.
It's like one of the levels of hell.
We've got to put a wedge of light. So we have Awakening Through King Yoga, which is Facebook group, private, and we teach, and we've got practice rooms for breathing exercises, for mantra, using all of that's our practice workbook, where people can come together, they can talk, studying that book, but coming into classrooms 20 minutes, half an hour on a regular basis, so that they get them over that hump of not wanting to look at the worms on the bottom of the stone, as you've just described it, because it's easier if your mate's going to come in that room and you're going to do that with them and you're going to see them at that certain time. And we're finding that we've got small groups, maybe no more than 10, but usually about 5 people will meet for, in various classes, but it keeps them going. And within the group, we've also got like buddy systems. We buddy people up so that if there's a challenge, they at least they've got somebody that they can say, I'm having problems today. Could you, focus me? Could you help me? And
That's great.
And before we had that, it was actually pretty lonely. I mean, I go up to the London Temple, but I have to schedule 3 hours each way. So it's a big ask.
Yeah.
But to be able to come online in a room and you get used to it, it's not okay. It's not, you don't actually be able to smell the perfume if you like, or hug someone, but there is a real connection in a room.
Yeah.
The energy is there in the room. We can feel who the people are, and it's a huge benefit. So
Love that.
practice is
practice. That's what it is. And especially even if you're talking about like baseline psychic development. I was just talking to somebody today who was, she's like, well, I'm not psychic and I can never be psychic, because you're just born that way. And I wasn't born that way. And I was like, hold up, time out. And I was like, well, were you born a concert pianist or a professional athlete? Like in my mind, we all have, it's like an ability, like athletic ability or musical ability. You don't just become a concert pianist. I was telling her, like, the professional psychics you see, ones on TV, they study, they work, they know, they've learned a knowledge system, and they practice. We need that container. All the things that I provide for my students are the things you were just talking about, that we need a knowledge set, we need a community, we need a mentor, and we need the practice and feedback from other people about, and to share, because the spiritual path has been very lonely. And so many of us can't talk about it. It's kind of one of in my mind, the blessings of the pandemic that, we all sort of had to reach out to each other through these online, whether it's Facebook or whatever social media thing you're doing, except for TikTok, which I still feel like is one of the levels of hell, but that's just me. That, we've been able to come together and inform these communities with, maybe that's not something. And, sometimes in certain parts of the United States, it's like, I'm not going to say they're going to stone you to death if you talk about this stuff, but, it's, if you're in the Bible Belt or some, different parts of the United States, it's really not cool to have, have conversations like we're having in the general public, right? So and what do you do if you're from a place like that and you're going through this kind of spiritual awakening? And there's certainly other parts of the world where the forces of repression, are keeping down. And I don't know if this is part of your belief system, but I sort of feel like there's maybe it's my early Star Wars sort of based philosophy that I had, that as we enlighten and awaken, the sort of the forces of opposition kind of come in, to block that. And I feel like communities like what you're talking about can hold us together through that, the forces of, resistance, I call them, but, I don't know what they are really, but
if you're interested in the real Jedi story, Dr. King was, because every master that comes, Dr. King is the master for the Aquarian Age. So when Jesus came, he was the master for the Piscean Age. And the Dr. Kings, they always come with a primary and a secondary mission. And the primary, the secondary mission is usually the teachings and healing and things like that you hear about, but they always have a primary mission as well. And Dr. King was a Jedi. He astral projected into the lower astral realms, and he was one of the few people trained in the combat, and he transmuted. It was the apocalypse. The predicted apocalypse took place in the lower astral realms in the 1960s. and he took on the forces of darkness. The 6 adepts transmuted the dark forces, the darkest of the dark, brought to the
Yeah,
light.
so interesting. I mean, I'm fascinated by that. I'd love to hear more about it. And I hear, like, you know, so how, like, I love the stories of the Golden Dawn and the Hermetic societies that, like, did battle with the occultists that, you know, Hitler had going on, trying to bring about the destruction of the world. And there was the opposite, you know, group in the Hermetic societies that were doing this sort of spiritual warfare. It's been happening for a while.
Oh, I haven't heard about that.
Yeah, you can read about it. And even in and they say, if you study the Golden Dawn, that the Standing Stone in England were created by the Druids to prevent invasion from other countries, but also from the astral realm.
Really?
So yeah, it's that sort of spiritual warfare is a long history.
Yeah. It's not sort of publicized it's not something we push out in this society because it's you know, violence, and but it is a key part of the adept. Every day we should thank the adepts for what they did. So
yeah, so cool.
Talk about
cool to hear that.
Yeah.
And of course, with anything, any big battle, if the top man's taken out, transmuted, so raised up, so his power's taken away, then there's always a power struggle from the other, if you want, upcoming lords of the manor, and we're still getting backwash from that. So there is still the trying to hold on to the power, which is why I think that we've got all this chaos at the moment, because you know, we were told at the end that the watch the tail of the dragon because it still has a sting,
right?
And
yeah, there's the black magicians and the military are opposing forces. Yeah, so there's that balance too.
Yeah, it's interesting, and all of these movies have, it's almost like bringing it into the consciousness in a story form that sort of opens the minds of the younger people to the possibility.
Right. You can see it in a science fiction movie and, you know, begin to accept it, you know. I was just thinking when you were talking about that, like Thomas Aquinas, who was one of my favorite mystics, he was said to have, he could bilocate, he could, you know, he'd be like, was proven that he was in his cell and he was in the Vatican at the same time, you know. And people would say he would do battle with demons in his cell, or he'd do battle with the forces of darkness, you know, that and I wonder if he was another one of those people who was sort of sent down to handle that. Like you had even Buddha, like Buddha, when he reached enlightenment, it was you know, the demon Maya came to shoot arrows at him, and Jesus on the cross had to deal with the devil. Like, I just think it's like that, you know.
Full of
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, kind of as we raise up our consciousness, that's something that sometimes we have to deal with. It's not something I've had to do. I mean, I deal with garden variety, you know, negativity, I call it, because I work on people, and they, you know, it's trauma, and, you know, well, it's trauma. And that's, you know, what you have to do as healers. That's go into the darkness of that with our light, and try to bring some light and healing into those darker places that we have just as humans. And they're sometimes spiritual entities and forces that go along, that are attracted to that and can show up there, you know.
I was reading on your blog about an interesting article about the Target ghosts.
Yeah, ghosts in the Target bathroom.
Yeah. That many bathrooms are haunted because of the EMF and the water tubing.
Yes. And a lot of people die in bathrooms, oddly. So they go in there and die and can't get out. But it's always bathrooms and basements, attics, those things, you know, places tend to collect the lost souls.
So you can help them out. You help them out of the bathroom. Yeah.
It's sort of, to me, community service. Like, if I'm out and about in the world and I'm seeing something like that, I'll do what I can, you know. Like you would see any suffering person, you know, you would try to help.
And so is that because concentration is one of the most important abilities to developers, is that when you develop your psychic powers,
you
want to have them under control, you know, because
Yeah.
You don't want to have them pop up at the wrong time. You have to be able to concentrate on 2 levels.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it was my early meditation and actually studying 7 years in the Silva with the Silva people. In a very when my brain was still forming, I think, I was doing that training. And so they taught me how to shift my brainwave state at will, which is what professional psychics need to do. We learn how to shift into like an alpha state for readings, and then a trance channel is lower. That's like the theta, the low theta state where the really deep stuff is coming in. And so I think that it's learning how to shift and also concentrating, holding your concentration. That's what meditation helps with, especially concentration meditations. How do you hold your mind focused on one thing for a long time?
You had good karma to be born in the West, but still with all this training to get as a young child.
Yeah, it was very rocky, and I had some really, in some ways, and I had some really remarkable help along the way. I felt very blessed, by the sort of assistant. I felt like that was sent from the other side, to sort of help me when I really needed it.
Yeah, you talk about spirit guides a lot, and
yeah,
you're very clear because a lot of people, they see the spirit world as being a sort of a mystical place where nothing's really solid, and but I've seen from the studies that it's a physical place,
right?
Just at a different frequency, so you get more advanced people able to come down and help you. And, what sort of experiences have you had with that?
Actually, in my book, I have a map. I put a map in there, and it's a map that I adapted from the Theosophical Society, and some schools of shaman and my own experiences. I sort of created something because I do feel like there's a structure to the spiritual worlds that and when our psychic abilities are just opening, we think it's really random, like there's no rhyme or reason to it, but there is, and learning our way around the map can really help navigate. We don't want to go to the lower astral plane or the astral plane really at all. We want to go above that if we can, but if we don't know where that is or how to get what that means or how to avoid it, then a lot of sort of newbie psychics and people who are just opening to this can get themselves into quite a bit of trouble. It's like the bad neighborhood you don't really want to walk through at night, like you don't go down that street at night kind of. We need to know where that is so we can be safe. It's like street smarts. If you have a map, you can be street smarts and make good decisions about where you're going. So, and teaching the map, studying the map, creating it for myself, and then teaching it is part of the process of discernment. And discernment is one of the most difficult skills to learn as a psychic. And that's just understanding where you are, what kind of spirit you're dealing with. I happen to be born with that gift, but that's kind of rare actually, but I can teach it if I, help people go through the map. And that's how you learn to tell what kind of being that you're dealing with. Do you really have an angel? Is it an archangel? Is it a being of higher consciousness? Is it a trickster spirit from the astral that's just trying to fool you? And that's common again if you're in the wrong neighborhood. And even now, like I just see higher and higher level spirits coming through all the time. Off planet spirits, I call them off planet spirits, but there be the ETs, the extraterrestrial beings that are around. And in my terminology is Galactic Federation. I think you call it something very slightly different, but not much, right? Interplanetary Parliament, right? It's the same thing, and so in the past even 5 years, just seeing people access to these higher states of consciousness and also higher frequency spirit beings come through in a much stronger way. So it's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Is it a horizontal map or a vertical map?
It's a 3-dimensional map, really. It's kind of like, there are layers that come out like side along where we are and also up and down from where we are. So sometimes I think about, like, if you think about the ocean, where we are in the ocean, you can go up and down and you can go, sides like 4-dimensional chess kind of, so there are dimensions that go sideways and up and down. As far as you can tell. That's in my recent one, Awakening Your Psychic Abilities.
Okay. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, people can get that book. It's lisacampion.com as well, your website.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I don't sell the book on my website. Mostly Amazon or any other book retailer, resellers will that's where you can get it.
and you have classes, private sessions. People can consult you for a
Yeah.
consultation, one-on-one, or you have
Yep.
psychic self-defense boot camp,
Mm-hmm.
video classes, psychic protection for pros.
What's a boot camp? Sorry, Jack, being rude again. Boot camp. Tell me about the boot camp. Is that
The
something
boot
that
camp
we
is
need to
fun.
promote to people?
The psychic self-defense boot camp, and it's like and I teach really all levels of psychic development, from very beginner, intermediate, advanced, for professional levels. I train people to be professional psychics. If you want to go pro, what you need to know. And the psychic self-defense, I never have been able to teach psychic development without also teaching psychic self-defense. I feel like it's super important. If we're going to open people up psychically, we also need to teach them how to protect themselves. And I picked psychic self-defense because I was a martial artist, and I'm holding in my mind this idea of street smarts as an analogy for the way that I teach. So of course I'm going to give you some psychic self-defense if we're going to open up, and that would just be like most of the time what we need. 80% of the time is the energy from other people that we need to defend ourselves against. People who have intrusive energy. The more sensitive we are, the more that's difficult for sensitive types to have boundaries and say no, and you can't be in my space energetically or physically. Sometimes we need psychic self-defense from the environments that we occupy, and the more sensitive we become, the more sensitive we are to our physical environments. And if I want a good night's sleep in a hotel or an Airbnb, I might have to clear that space. It's like Murphy's Law. There could be 800 rooms in that hotel. They give me the one with a ghost in it. And like, oh yeah, there was a triple murder here last week. Sorry, and that's happened to me, actually, true story. Or whatever ghost is in the vicinity. I'm like, as a psychic, I'm a bit of a ghost magnet. So they all show up and they're like, yay, this is here. And so I just it's just part of my thing. I'm going to sleep. I have to do that. So we all might have to do that. We become sensitive to the places we occupy. And sometimes we need help with maybe identifying and removing spiritual beings that don't have our best interests at heart. Those astral beings, lower astral beings that are attracted to newly awakened psychics who don't have great boundaries. Children, super angelic people, high frequency people, empaths. It can be you're like a little light bulb. This in the light that we and especially kids, small children are like this, children just light up the astral plane like a little light bulb, and all the spiritual planes, and it creates curiosity, and maybe some beings come in, especially if you have the soul of a healer. These beings may need healing, and they're coming, but you don't want them hanging around in your bedroom at 3:00 in the morning when you're trying to sleep. We need a boundary. We need to recognize them, and we need the boundary. So I think psychic self-defense is an important part of the opening, so we can open and feel safe.
Yeah, and again, that's perfectly in alignment with our teachings. We've got psychic self-defense CDs and protective practices, and be careful what you eat, because we don't want all the energy of somebody that's been in a kitchen, just had a fight with some, No, you don't want to eat all of that stuff. Yeah. So
you don't want to eat meat from sad cows either. Like, that can be a problem if you're sensitive.
Yeah, and we've forgotten all of this stuff, and it needs to be brought back into the public forum with a solution, and that's what you're coming with. The same as our society. We come with practical solutions. It's not going
right
and hoping it's all going to be okay. No, there are magic in hand signs. There's magic in the way you think. There's certain practices that keep the body stabilized, and you have to know how to bring it back into balance. And it's music to my ears to hear you explain it, because so often it's vague and there's nothing, can't get my teeth into it, which is why I keep back a dot. Well, and what's that about? Because it's so refreshing. to know that you're out there and you're going, that you do this and then you do that. And if that happens, then you need to do that and watch
Right.
that, watch your back. Yes.
Have
that's
some
what it's
common sense. We need
about.
to have some common sense, as psychics and spiritual people. There's no reason to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I'm not a very like airy fairy psychic. I'm not really much of a new ager, quite honestly. Like and most of my practicality is having to have lived through it. Just having to deal with what's come across through my range of experience, and a lot of it is training that I've had, but I've also just had to find practical solutions to problems that I deal with, on a regular basis. And I'm really happy to pass them on. It was hard-won knowledge, and so it makes me really excited to pass on what I've learned to help other people have a smoother ride than I did.
Yes, bravo.
Yeah, it
Well
really
done.
resonates. Yeah.
Thanks
Thanks so much. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. It's so fun.
Right. We'll keep in touch. And when the next book comes out, come back and tell us more.
Awesome. And I'm going to keep looking into your society. It's so interesting. And I'm going to keep checking it out and see what you guys are doing. It's beautiful, what you're up to. And I'm eager to learn more about it.
Brilliant.
Thank
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.